So I'd like you to take a minute and just look at these pictures, these two images, and ask yourself, which future for the planet? They're artistic renditions of the future. And I think, without exception, everyone will pick the top picture. You'll reject the sort of bottom dystopian Blade Runner sort of urban blight. You'll pick the top picture. And what that tells me is that everyone is an environmentalist. Everyone is a conservationist. Everyone cares about nature. You may keep it a secret. You may not advertise it. You may not preach about it, but you care. And maybe one of the reasons you keep it a secret, and maybe one of the reasons you do not advertise it, is there's also a narrative out there that sometimes gets associated with being an environmentalist or a conservationist, and it's what I call the doom and gloom narrative. It's very misanthropic, but let me sort of run through that trope for you. The trope goes like this: humans are a blight upon the planet. Through our avarice, our ignorance, our just materialistic, rampant consumerism, our lust for relentless reproduction, sinister corporations, we're destroying the planet and we're on the way to an apocalypse. It's not a particularly inspiring picture, and it leads you to either despair or to go arm the barricades in some sort of revolution. But there's an equally unfortunate narrative that can sometimes lead us in the wrong direction with the environment, and that's what I would call the what me worry narrative. What me worry. And it's based in some fact. Take, for example, the passenger pigeon in North America. There are over 3 billion passenger pigeons in North America. 3 billion. Good historical records of flocks of passenger pigeons that were a mile wide, 300 miles long, that took 14 hours to fly over you. And we blasted away. We managed to deliberately kill and drive them to the extinction. The last passenger pigeon, Martha, died in captivity a little over 100 years ago. So it doesn't sound too great. But to a certain person, you could sit there and say, well, we did that, but was there an environmental apocalypse? Do we even notice it? How many people remember it now? And humans are so ingenious. Yes, we do damage the environment, but we're very clever. We're very, very clever. When things get really serious, we innovate our way out of it. It's the what me worry. And that trope is just as bad as the doom and gloom. And there's a third one that is appealing to me sometimes, and it's probably appealing to you, but it can also be misleading. And that goes something like this. It starts with the doom and gloom. It starts by saying, oh, we got climate change, rising seawater, shortage of food, shortage of water. But you know what? I have an idea. I have the solution. And the solution might be healthy soils. The solution might be let the market solve the problem. The solution might be let's just engage in a social network. Just think of the power of the social networks. Well, all those are good ideas, but there is no simple solution. There is no simple solution. But there's an incredible menu of solutions, and I want to talk about these bright spots just to say how we really can get that future. One of the first bright spots is we've learned by experience in the last 20, 30 years that ecological restoration can really work. It works better than any of us thought. One of the most dramatic examples is in Seoul, Korea. And if you look at the bottom image there, that's a beautiful river running through the center of Seoul. It didn't used to be that way. That restoration just finished 10 years ago. It used to be a 6-lane highway running through the center of the city, which was ripped up, daylighted the river, and now people love it. The fish, the birds, the insects, the invertebrates are there. It's a thriving ecosystem. Remarkable. Another one a little bit closer to home is Yellowstone. I don't know if how many people have had an opportunity to visit Yellowstone. It's one of the greatest parks in the world. Well, we exterminated grizzly bears from Yellowstone. We exterminated wolves from Yellowstone. And in 1902, we were down to 50 bison. Go there now. There's 4,000 bison. There's 10 wolf troops. And there's 500 grizzlies. And these aren't rare. You can go to Yellowstone and pretty much count out, if you go the right time, hearing the wolves howl at night, which is a pretty spectacular sound. That's an amazing success story of how conservation turned back a system. A very different success story, but one I think is going to be much more prominent, is there is a narrative among some environmentalists that business, economic growth, capitalism, corporations are the foe. They can also be the solution. For a long time, businesses have engaged in philanthropy and given money for good causes. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about real partnerships, working together. My science team works with Dow Chemical Company. And one of the neat things we do, one of my favorite accomplishments, is our ecologists and our foresters sat in conference rooms with their chemical engineers and civil engineers and came up with a solution. The problem was ground level ozone. Ground level ozone exceeds compliance and it affects 130 million people in the US. It's a significant problem. The typical solution is end-of-pipe technology. An alternative is restore forest. And we did the physiology and the economics to show it was cheaper to replant at large scale southern hardwood forests, and it does a better job curing ozone. And it could be a significant natural solution. Also helps climate, it brings back fish and wildlife and recreation. That only came about because foresters and ecologists got in the same room with engineers, chemical engineers, and civil engineers. Another dimension that we sometimes lose sight of, and I'm surprised there hasn't been so many campaigns recently, but when I was younger I remember this, is dolphin-safe tuna. In the 80s, there was a campaign, consumer-driven campaign, to change the practices of getting tuna, because early on in the 70s, as the tuna fishery was expanding, we were killing as many as 300,000, 400,000, or 500,000 tuna a year, dolphins a year. We were killing 300,000, 400,000, 500,000 dolphins a year in pursuit of tuna. Consumers organized a boycott, changed the fishing practices. Now, the world model, the global model, is dolphin-safe tuna. And it's worked. You can verify that and go out and see what happens. There are still some dolphins killed, but the numbers are 100, 1,000. The highest numbers I've seen is 3,000 or 4,000 in the worst years. 3,000 or 4,000 dolphins killed might be a tragedy, but it's an awful lot better than 500,000. Amazing consumer power. Community engagement and volunteerism. I travel all around the world. Wherever I go, I think that the basic thing of us as a tribal species, we are a tribal species, is engagement as volunteers, is getting together to do things together. I also think it's a particularly American trait. In the Gulf of Mexico, when the Nature Conservancy organizes work parties to restore oyster reefs, we get swamped. We can't handle the volunteers. These are people that are volunteering to go out in the mud and handling oysters, which you could cut your hands. And why do they do it? They do it because they can see an accomplishment. They can go to Google Earth. How cool is it to engage in a volunteer activity and then go to Google Earth, find your site in Google Earth, say, I was part of building that oyster reef, which you can do, and not only that, guess what? That oyster reef is doing what we thought it should do. It reduces storm surge and wave action, and instead of the coast receding and us losing the coast, we're rebuilding the marsh out. You could see that activity. Maybe you don't want to go out in the mud and cut your hands up on oysters, but there's other ways we're finding that people volunteer, especially those of us who like to spend a lot of time in front of a computer. Our Hawaii program did a really interesting experiment. One of our first ones is there's invasive trees that are invading the native Hawaii forest. They're very hard to see. If you look at the photo, it's hard to notice the invasive tree in there. How do we solve that problem? Almost 3 million satellite images. Now, who's going to look for that tree? There's no actually software that does it. We crowdsourced it. For free, we crowdsourced it, got almost 3 million images, every image viewed by 100 different pair of eyes, and then we could target the trees and go find them. First experiment we did, crowdsourcing over the internet with remote sensing, could be an amazing environmental triumph. Education. Education is important to probably almost every sort of social issue we face, but no less so than the environment. And we have a program where we take kids from high schools in cities where you wouldn't expect them to be engaged with nature, usually underrepresented minorities, and they work as scientists and field assistants at our sites. If you look at these pictures, you could see the joy and the fun they're having. And I started as a field biologist. It is fun. There's not much better than being a field biologist. But these kids love it. But it also does more than just give them fun. The United States does not have enough scientists and engineers. We're having a hard time training them. The kids that come out of our LEAF program, and these are demographic communities where you would never expect it, More than 1 out of 3 of them end up being science majors in college. And not only that, over half of them, we follow them through Facebook Care. That engagement in the field, working, has changed their lives in a way that our society needs their lives to change. I want to sort of end up by talking about us as a species, Homo. Man. We've been here for 2 million, 2.5 million years, over 100,000 generations. So, what does that mean? Many of you, I bet every person, imagine, try to remember if there's ever been a time you've been out at dark at night, maybe in a forest, maybe on a street, and you felt the hair in the back of your neck. It's a prickle. What is that? That prickling. I mean, it's physical. You felt it. It's you as prey. It's you as prey. For most of those 2 million years, we were not at the top of the food chain. We had to be finely tuned to the environment and all of its sensory input. Those 100,000 generations. You do not lose that neurobiological wiring with 10 generations in the city. You just don't lose it. Because that wiring is so in there, because if your ancestors didn't have it, you wouldn't be here. And so what does that mean? What does that mean in practical terms? I got to share this with you. It was just published last week. So it's hot off the presses. This is a really brilliant graduate student at Stanford, and I work with him, and that's why I know it. His name is Greg Brotman. He did this experiment. It's one of the best experiments I know of. It kind of brings this home. He took Palo Altans, citizens from Palo Alto, and he gave them 2 different experimental treatments. One was 50 minutes, a 50-minute walk in a natural area, a natural reserve. And the other one is a 50-minute walk in a residential area. So they're both out in fresh air, getting exercise and fresh air. But the walk in the natural area, they found really profound changes compared to the walk in the residential. Reduced anxiety, not trivially, 40-50% reduction. Reduced rumination, which in psychologically is sort of like being self-absorbed, just dwelling on all your problems. Better memory. There's a quick test you can get for memory. And better problem solving. It's like you took a prescription of nature and you got that effect. There's many more aspects of his thesis. I can't talk about them because they're not published yet, but you're going to hear about it. It's cutting edge science. I brought up Greg Brotman's research because it's really, really wonderful, clear science. It's an experiment with people in nature. This idea has been around for a while. This whole biologists have had it for a while with my perspective. Biophilia, we are part of nature. Intrinsic, innately, we have some connection to nature. We live in cities, we have our cell phones, we're connected to our computers, we might forget it, but it's there. We can't lose it, we can't escape it. And it matters. I've been talking so much about what we do to nature and what nature does for us. There's one mistake with that view. The other point I want to make is nature's not out there as this passive thing. Nature all the time is incredibly creative and innovative itself. It reacts, and I got to tell you 2 of my favorite stories about reactive nature. This is a photo of an eastern coyote in North America. The eastern coyote in North America has wolf genes in it. 100 years ago, maybe more than that, when wolves were at really tiny, low numbers in Wisconsin or Minnesota, Mr. and Mrs. Wolf were looking for love and they couldn't find another wolf, they found a coyote. So you have coyotes with wolf genes in them. They're a different species almost. They're 30% heavier, their jaws are much heavier, they could take down deer. It's a pretty, nature, through opportunism, has created this new coyote in the western US. It's a fundamentally different beast. It just kind of awes me. This dark and sinister picture is a story that's not good for conservation, but I still want to tell it because it's a story about, again, how inventive nature is. Maybe 150 years ago, whaling ship came to an island called Gulf Island in the South Atlantic. No people live there, but there's 10 million seabirds that nest there. So a little house mouse, Mus musculus, nice little cute gentle mouse, about this long, furry, you might stroke it. Jumped off, got on the land with all those birds there, come back 100 years later, more than doubled its size. It's a vicious carnivorous mouse now. It eats about 30% of its weight in bird flesh a day. It's a huge conservation threat. I mean, because it's really threatening albatrosses, so we want to get rid of it. But it still reminds us that nature's not passive. Nature created this huge carnivorous mouse. It's been described as when you see it feeding on an albatross, like a kitty cat feeding on a hippo. And it's an amazing biological story. So nature's not passive. Let's not forget that. This is one of my favorite pieces of art, Peaceable Kingdom by Edward Hicks, a Quaker artist from the 19th century. And I put this up here because the way I think about nature and conservation and what we need to do with it is somewhat reflected in this. When you go to a doctor, I hope this is the case, your doctor doesn't tell you, you're dying, and let's see if we can slow it down. I hope that's not what your doctor says. I hope the doctor says, let's take care of your health. Well, that's the way we have to think about the planet. Not doom and gloom, not that it's dying. Let's take care of its health. And if you don't believe that you're connected to it, spend the time. Do Greg Brotman's experiment on yourself. Maybe the weather's not good this weekend, maybe the weather's not good next weekend, but find a time, do a 50-minute treatment on yourself. Treat yourself to 50 minutes in nature and pay attention. Be mindful of how you feel, your mood, and your physiology, maybe your alertness. Do it with your teenagers. Maybe it'll calm them. Do it with your partners. But do this trial, and I promise that most of you will feel, most people will feel it. Once you feel it then, once you recognize your connection to nature, because you can't get rid of that 2 million years, once you recognize it, you'll be motivated to do something about it. And my final point is, there isn't one thing you can do. Choose what is suitable for you. It could be education. It could be engaging with business and changing the business practices. It could be social networks. It could be actually volunteering. None of them by themselves will work. So don't do something that doesn't suit you. But if you pick the one activity, if everybody were to pick that activity, and they would, if they were mindful of how connected they were to nature, we would end up with that positive future at the end.